We're about to get started. I got work to do. I got work to do. Good morning and welcome to day 4 of week 2 of our budget hearings. This morning we're so glad to be joined by the Department of State. Before I begin, Chairman Struzzi, do you have any introductory comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Harris. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. For the Department of State, the governor is proposing a general fund spend of roughly $44.4 million for the upcoming fiscal year, an increase of $1.3 million or 2.9% over the current fiscal year. Just a couple of highlights that I'm sure we'll get into that we would like to learn a bit more about. A $1.4 million initiative within the voter registration and education appropriation for voter education and direct outreach, and then an executive authorization for $1.3 million in a new line for publishing constitutional amendments. So we look forward to hearing your testimony today, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We definitely want to welcome the Secretary of the Department of State, Secretary Al Schmidt, here, as well as all of those from the Department of State. My friends from the Northeast part of the state always like to remind us about everyone who's a secretary who's from the Northeast. I do want to make mention that the Secretary of State was once a city commissioner in the city of the first class. And we thank him for his work there, and we thank him for his work here, and glad to have him. Also, we have, he'll introduce all his folks, but Jonathan Marks, I would say, is probably the second most recognized face in the Department of State for all of us elected officials. I think you will all look at him and notice why we all know Mr. Marks. Before we begin, in the middle of the table is our timekeeper. Each member will have 5 minutes to ask a question. When they begin, the light will be green. When they have 30 seconds left, it will be yellow. And when it turns red, please conclude with your comments. Before we begin, if everyone could stand, even on the back bench, because you may have to come up. We're going to swear everybody in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right, everybody may be seated. And let me see. Secretary, would you like to have a statement, or would you like to go directly to questions? It should just be on.
Oh, sorry. It literally says always on. I apologize. Good to see you again, Chairman. Thank you for having me. Good to see you as well, Chairman and members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. Just very briefly, I've submitted written remarks. But as you know, the Pennsylvania Department of State has a very diverse portfolio of responsibilities, all very important, ranging from a responsibility to oversee elections in the Commonwealth to safeguarding the health and safety of Pennsylvanians. Just very briefly, in this past year, we've continued to experience significant improvement in the department, have worked closely with our counties to improve and unify election administration as much as we have the ability to do so. In Pennsylvania, we revised our election materials so that counties can use the same mail-in ballot envelopes for in-person voting, revised the provisional ballot envelopes to drive down any error rates that could occur. In our regulatory programs, our processing times are down by at least 75% across the board, some more than 85%, which helps people provide services to Pennsylvanians and make a livelihood for themselves and their families. I'm joined here today by Deputy Secretary Jonathan Marks, Deputy Secretary who's responsible for our elections team, Deputy Secretary Kalanji Johnson, responsible for our regulatory programs, Acting Commissioner Ariane Claggett from BPOA, and our outstanding Budget Director, Kim Mattis. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, sir. We're going to start with Representative Friel.
Thank you, Chairman. And Secretary Schmidt, thank you for coming out today. As you said, elections is one of the most important things that you guys do, and I want to talk a little bit about elections this past November in Chester County. As you know, about 70,000 third-party and independent voters were left out of the initial poll books that were delivered, and the investigation that went into that found the cause was, a small cause of human error, which mistakes can happen, right? We know that. But in something as important as our election, we have an obligation to minimize those mistakes. Can you talk about just like how rare a mistake like this is and what the department and the county can do to ensure that nothing like this happens again?
It is extremely rare, and the only time that we've experienced that where a county does a poll book, it's called a poll book extract, to extract the eligible voters for that election, for a general election, that did not include all registered voters, and it only included major party voters. And it was a result, and we've met with the delegation, we've met with the commissioners, we've met with the vendors, we've met with everyone, and it's very clear that that was the cause of what occurred. However rare it is, and however well the county did in addressing the issue once it became apparent, there are, certainly in my experience of running elections for 10 years in one of our counties in Pennsylvania, there's no such thing as a small problem on election day. If a street gets torn up because of a water leak or a gas line issue that prevents voters from reaching a single polling place, that is a major issue. So we approach all these issues as though they're critical, which they are. Anytime any voter is impeded from making their voice heard is a significant issue for us.
No, I appreciate that. And just to put an exclamation point at the end of that, we had these voters left off the polls, and I think it was good to know that provisional ballots, the process that was in place, that when something like this does happen, that every eligible voter was able to get in there, cast their vote, and have it counted in that election. Is that true of the investigation? Found that to be the case?
That is accurate, sir. One other thing I wanted to mention is that the default for poll book extraction of voters for general election, the default is to include all voters. So on our end, we've made just a couple of changes. One is to reach out to the counties to make sure that they're doing things correctly and confirming to make sure something like this doesn't occur again. And when any issue occurs, especially one like this, HAVA many years ago made provisional ballots available for voters. So if a machine is down or there's a poll book issue or whatever else might occur to prevent a voter from casting their vote on the regular voting system, then they have the ability to vote by a provisional ballot, a paper provisional ballot that is then adjudicated after the election. Everyone.
I want to thank you for addressing that issue, and also in the time that you guys, that day and the days after, were there to assist the county with both the investigation and our delegation with understanding what occurred and how it was resolved, and brought to our satisfaction that at least we took care of the voters that day, and I'm really hopeful that we're not going to see a mistake like that again as we go into this election cycle. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, and thank you again for having me in Chester County for your Voter Hall of Fame event some time ago. It was a really impressive showing of the dedication of voters in your county.
Yeah, we had some 50-year in a row without missing a single vote. That was pretty impressive. So thank you, sir.
Wow, that is impressive. Thank the gentleman. Representative Brown.
Secretary Schmidt, The governor's budget proposes $2 million for voter registration and education, and that's a whopping $1.4 million or a 250% increase. Now, if the General Assembly had enacted new laws that changed the way Pennsylvanians vote, or perhaps instituted a common sense voter ID law, I would understand the need for additional voter education and outreach. However, voting methods have remained unchanged basically since Act 77 from 2019 and likely will not be changed in 2026. So what does this initiative entail and why is the funding necessary?
And you're certainly right, Representative, for better or worse, election reform has not happened in Pennsylvania that might address some outstanding issues that our counties struggle with, which is incredibly important to me. But all elections, even though equally important, whether it's for a President of the United States or county commissioner, turn out very significantly in these elections. And in federal general elections like this one, there's certainly a lot more voter engagement and a lot more voter education that is needed, and that explains the 1.4 million increase in terms of reaching out to voters and making sure that they're aware of the basic things that are required in order to vote in this election. It helps lift the burden from our counties so they're not carrying the weight of that in a federal election cycle. And I would commit to you now, as I've committed to this chamber before, and have done throughout my career, there would never be any voter engagement that would be different for one voter than would be different for another voter.
But
regardless
Secretary,
of your party, regardless of where you live, regardless of your age, regardless of anything, we want to make sure that all voters are equally informed of important deadlines, dates, requirements, and all the rest.
so can you give me a specific example of an education piece that would be used?
There's a couple of things that are mailers that can be done to help notify voters of the important dates and what's required when they vote. There are text messages and there are other approaches that you can take to notify voters to make sure that they're aware of basic requirements for voting in Pennsylvania to alleviate the burden that counties have to carry with those voters calling up. To let them know, for example, when the mail-in ballot deadline is if they choose to vote by mail, to make sure they know where they can go to look up where their polling place is if they choose to vote in person.
All right, I'll look forward to seeing those. It's quite a hefty price tag, though. Back in September of 2023, Governor Shapiro implemented a new policy whereby Commonwealth residents who were obtaining a new or renewing a driver's license or ID card would be automatically registered to vote unless they opted out of doing so. In his initial press release, Governor Shapiro said that, quote, automatic voter registration is a common sense step to ensure election security and save Pennsylvanians time and tax dollars. Within that press release, the governor suggested that this provision would ensure election security and save taxpayer dollars. During last year's hearing, your agency was unable to calculate how many taxpayer dollars were saved. To this point, has your agency looked into this issue to see if taxpayer dollars were saved, and if so, how much?
Processing an electronic application, which is essentially what AVR is, takes a fraction of the time. If I recall, it takes about an eighth as much time to process an electronic application that might come through either registering to vote online or registering to vote through automatic voter registration at a PennDOT office. The burden that the clerks at the county level carry in processing paper applications is significant compared to electronic applications.
So do we have a dollar amount attached to that?
There is no way for us to calculate exactly how many dollars would be saved by the program, other than knowing, having done that for 10 years, the comparison of electronic voter applications versus paper applications is really significant for the amount of time the counties have to spend processing those applications. In addition to the cost savings as a result of the time that the clerks take to do it, automatic voter registration through PennDOT is more accurate. There isn't a clerk looking at a paper application form trying to figure out if that address is 6308 or 8308. The name is certainly spelled correctly. The information is all correct. So it is faster to process and more accurate when done through an online application or through AVR. And AVR, in terms of our analysis of what has occurred since its implementation in, I think, September of 2023, it hasn't benefited any party one way or another. There's almost exactly the same percentage of R's that registered as D's that registered.
No, I was just looking for total savings, but thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, and
Morning,
to the other officials. I have a question for you around data privacy and security, particularly in the context of election data. We deal with a lot of people's information, like a home address of voters and the voter registration. And, as I'm sure you're well aware of, in the climate of political violence, there's a lot of elected officials' information, personal information on file. I know is the season we're filing petitions with lots of addresses, home addresses on them. What are some of the steps that you've taken, and it can be agency-wide, but to safeguard this data? And I know you've done some things to make that a little less publicly accessible in the interest of safety.
Right, and balancing the importance of safety with the transparency that we're required to provide, especially in the challenge period after candidates file, where not only do the petitions have to be made available, but also residency and other factors like that. In the last couple of years, the department has taken steps to, one, make sure that that information is only available for a short period of time. It is not available in a way that if you do a Google search, it would come up. You have to go through the portal. You have to go into the document to be able to see that. Essentially, those steps were to make that information a lot less accessible and only accessible for a limited period of time for obviously legitimate reasons. Do you mind if I ask Deputy Secretary Marks
I'd be pleased
to add to my comments?
Deputy Secretary, sure.
Thanks, Secretary. And yes, and we also redact addresses when appropriate from our records. That's something that we do in consultation with our county, with our council, excuse me. And we've also done additional training with our county election officials. There is a process in the voter registration law and in our regulations that allow individuals who may have a reason, a safety concern, to have their home address redacted from any publicly available files or information that either the department may have or the county may have.
And thank you for those efforts. And let me shift gears a little bit, but it's probably still going to be Deputy Secretary Marks's terrain here. Wanted to thank you, Deputy Secretary, for working through. We advanced some legislation last year for the Electoral College Reform Act, which is a fancy way of saying we're putting a few more dates and some certainty into the process, or we'd like to do that, and I appreciate the work with that. We're hoping to bring that forward again this year to try to actually get it done. Is that something the department would welcome, to have some deadlines in there? And I know you were helpful in shaping some of those with us and telling us, some of the realities and what we could do and couldn't do.
Certainly the department would support any, changes to statutory deadlines, common sense changes that, enable counties to do the important work they have to do both pre-election and post-election, while also considering the very tight timelines that, particularly in a presidential election year, we have to meet to meet the Commonwealth's obligations under federal law. Without, I don't want to analyze a particular piece of legislation as I sit here, but we certainly be supportive of making updates to deadlines to make sure all of that important work gets done, and counties are able to do what they need to do to ensure that their vote totals are accurate before they certify.
The more certainty when it comes to election administration, the better, provided it's all obviously within the confines of the law. I testified in front of, I think it was the Senate, it was either Senate Rules Committee or Senate Admin Committee in D.C. In advance of ECRA being passed up there about the importance for our election administrators at the state and county level to have the certainty when it comes to when the deadlines are and what's required to be completed by each of those deadlines to make sure that everything is perfectly clear.
Great. I'll have to look at that testimony, and thank you both very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Secretary, Deputy Secretary Marks. Good to see you. I'd like to start my questions today in the area of professional licensing. It's my understanding that your department, the governor had requested a report or analysis about licensing, and maybe that just came out today. I think I appreciate the governor's desire to help recruit and keep people here in the state and kind of make it easier on our small businesses and individuals to start. Can you touch on that report a little bit and maybe provide some examples where we might be able to smooth the pathway in the area of licensing, switching it more to certificates and something like that?
Yes, certainly, Representative. And the governor made very clear from day one in this administration to me of the need to eliminate any unnecessary red tape, so-called red tape, in the Pennsylvania Department of State to make sure that when people are seeking licenses, as I said before, to provide services to their fellow Pennsylvanians or to make a living, that we should do everything we can to eliminate it as long as we are always safeguarding the health and safety of Pennsylvanians. One of the issues that the governor mentioned just up here a couple weeks ago was that the Pennsylvania Department of State would conduct a review to see where Pennsylvania's requirements are for different professional licensing, for different professions for licensing relative to other states, contiguous states. And that report is due today. I've obviously reviewed a draft of that report, and we'll include comparisons for you and this body and the administration to consider whether the requirements for training should be what they are right now. So
that's great.
In one state, let's say it's 1,000 hours. In Pennsylvania, it's 1,500 hours. Is 1,500 the right amount, or is 1,000 adequate?
I agree with you there, and maybe moving forward, we can look together to help streamline those. We got rid of the hair braiding stuff last year. I think our barbers are 1,200 hours or 1,250, and in Jersey, they're only 900. So, it's a positive thing, and if we can be of assistance, in streamlining that, we definitely want to be a part of it.
Thank you, Representative.
The next part of my questioning shifts to ERIC, our Electronic Registration Information Center. In particular, the trend, states have been leaving ERIC. Now there's only 25 member states, I think, in the nation that are participating in this. So I'm just wondering, Pennsylvania's role within ERIC, is that value added? I'm a big believer of election integrity, and we've been working on this double voting, which is what ERIC's supposed to address. But Ohio, West Virginia, New Jersey, Kentucky, that's in just some of our contiguous states and surrounding states. That's 25 million voters that are not getting cross-checked through ERIC. Is there something else that Pennsylvania should be doing or working in a different way so that, we can ensure that certainty that you were just talking about?
Yes, and I share your interest in election integrity. ERIC is a valuable resource for us to make sure that we don't have voters registered in more than one location, whether it's within Pennsylvania or Pennsylvania in some other state that belongs to ERIC. You're absolutely right. Undeniably, a number of states have left ERIC, and that leaves them with fewer resources and us with fewer resources when they leave. Those states that have left, and some have joined, I think New York is joining right now or just passed the legislature and the governor just signed it. So New York, a contiguous state, will be joining, which will help Northeast Pennsylvania for sure. But those states have, it's very clear, have struggled with establishing unilateral one-to-one data sharing agreements with other states so that the information that is required to do those sorts of checks that are necessary can be shared in a way that is safe and secure. We can't entrust in some sort of unsecure way Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, or anything else like that with other states. Eric, by the way, just to add a timely thing.
Real quick, one thing, because our seconds are left, and I know we only have a couple.
I'm sorry, sir.
You know, in Pennsylvania, it's only a 2-year window for Pennsylvania investigators to address double voting, like the way that it's addressed as a felony. Would the Department of State be supportive for maybe extending that so it would mirror the federal, so our investigators would have a longer time to look, because 2 years is really quick?
I can't really speak to the amount of time necessary, but I can speak to how important it is. As of yesterday afternoon, evening, there was a case that we identified from working with Eric of a double voter in Pennsylvania in Bucks County and Florida. As a result of our referral and working closely with our federal partners and law enforcement, there was a conviction yesterday of that individual who had voted in Pennsylvania and one other location. As rare as it is that that occurs, we have to remain constantly vigilant and always be investigating, as you're saying, in a timely manner so that it isn't something you get around to one day. And we've added resources in the department to assist with that effort.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you,
Chair.
Representative.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Abney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and your team for being here today. I wanted to talk a little bit about polling place safety and intimidation. I'm looking at a guidance that the Department of State put out in September of 2024, guidance on rules in effect at the polling place on Election Day. And there's a section on here around police officers and other peace officers. It says, generally, police officers are not permitted in the polling place. Uniformed or plainclothes police officers must remain 100 feet or more from the entrance of a polling place. The exceptions on this rule: when a police officer is personally voting, when a polling place is located in a building that also houses a police station, and when police officers are summoned to preserve the peace. If necessary, the local election officials or 3 voters in the precinct may call upon local officials, including constables, sheriffs, or police officers, to clear a path to the door if it is obstructed or preventing voters from voting, maintain order, and quell any disturbance if it arises. Uniformed police officers, such as constables or sheriffs, stationed in the polling place may have the effect of intimidating voters. The department recommends that counties balance the potentially intimidating effect of uniformed constables in the polling place with the need to preserve the peace. We also had the Attorney General Dave Sunday here, I think earlier this week. On the website, it says that it is illegal under Pennsylvania law to use any means to intimidate or attempt to intimidate voters, either inside or outside of a polling locations. Intimidating behavior can include words or actions. Furthermore, it is illegal for anyone to block or attempt to block by any means the entrance to the polls. Intimidating behavior should be reported immediately to your county board of elections. So I'm just curious, I'm looking at this, this guidance, particularly the section that says uniformed peace officers such as constables or sheriffs stationed in a polling place may have the effect of intimidating voters. Certainly we want to encourage all qualified electors and voters to come out if they so choose on election day and vote. Wondering if a guidance similar to this will be provided again to our county commissioners and or our county elections officials.
And our guidance is obviously consistent with and is driven by the laws in Pennsylvania. So our guidance is really reflecting what those laws provide and the restrictions around uniformed police officers being present at polling places while voting is occurring. We review those, the guidance that we have across the board every year to determine if they have to be updated in some way. And if an update to that specific piece of guidance our stakeholders or we feel are necessary, then we would certainly update it.
I want to switch gears a little bit to the shore system. Can you give us a little bit of an update, status update of how it's going, where it is in the process, and kind of what counties should expect with this new process?
Yes, certainly. The shore system, as you know, is the voter registration database that all of our counties rely on. The Department of State maintains it, but it's really our county partners that interface with it every day, as I did for 10 years. Soon after we had to terminate the contract with the previous vendor who had been contracted earlier to provide a shore replacement system. We immediately began not only approaching our county partners to make sure that everything is informed by them, the end users of this whole system, but also moving along as expeditiously as possible and responsibly as possible the shore replacement system. We put out an RFP and less than a year ago signed it with a new vendor, and we've been working with that vendor, informed by our county partners, on a replacement system.
How are you all looking to measure success if it actually works? Like, what are the things that you're looking to track to see if it's working?
I would say, in terms of the use of the shore system, I would say obviously the integrity of the process, its safety and security, so that it can't be in any way compromised from a cybersecurity breach or anything else like that. And very importantly, and I'm sorry I keep saying this, but to make sure our county partners have a system that they can rely on, that they work with every day, to make sure that it is the best for them. Because we're really providing, the Commonwealth is really providing a system for them to use to create a statewide voter registration database. Make it easier to work with. Shore has been around for a while and becomes increasingly expensive and becomes increasingly difficult to work with and extract the sort of information that you need in advance of Election Day. But ultimately, we want to make sure that everything we do is informed by our county partners, because they're the ones that interact with it every day.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
Gentlemen, Representative Mako.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary. Good to see you again, sir.
Likewise, sir.
In your opening remarks, you mentioned the improvements that your department is making. You said you went from 75 to 85% more efficiency now. I want to ask you about the new PAL system, the licensure IT system modernization. Did I get that right? Okay. Yeah. So from my understanding, I guess you contracted last year, May of last year. When can we expect that to come online, and what would be the final cost of that?
Initially, we had been looking at, as I testified before, we've been looking at rolling it out in 2 separate phases, from working with the people who would be using this system every day and working with the vendor and working with our performance management team. It was clear that that approach didn't make sense. But right now, the plan is to implement PALs in 2027. But that isn't a matter of just like waiting around for a new system to come online. As I mentioned, our processing times have been improved dramatically since January of 2023. The amount of time it takes for someone to get their call answered and response to that call is down dramatically. And I think the user experience has improved with some of the changes that we've made. May I ask Deputy Secretary Kalenji Johnson to add to my remarks?
Thank you, Secretary. Yes, I would echo the Secretary's statement, but also emphasize the fact that because of the nature of the implementation, we moved to a one rollout because we did not want to impact all of the successes that the Secretary mentioned. So in terms of the processing times, in terms of the responsiveness with customer service and in relation to the call volume, we don't want to do anything that would impact all of those efficiencies with the transition to the new system.
No, and I mean, that makes me feel better hearing that got more efficient, but now we're moving to a new system. I've been on professional, I know you gentlemen know this, I've been on professional licensure for 10 years, and every year it seems like the PAL system has just been brutal. It's just a new issue. We throw millions more at it. And then the licensees, their fees are kind of going up to help pay for covering down on some of those costs. And I guess I'm just curious if this new system, we finally got PALS right, and then we're going to move to the PALS 2.0. Have you solicited any feedback from the licensees on this process to help streamline it? Seeing as they are paying for the system to move forward.
Do you mind if I ask
Absolutely, go for it.
Commissioner Claggett from DPOA?
Yes, we have asked stakeholders for feedback on what will be better for the new licensing system. Some of the benefits that you'll see in the Evoke system is that the Evoke system will be mobile friendly. So now applicants will be able to complete applications on their phones and other mobile devices. Currently, that's something they cannot do in PALS. The user, I'm sorry.
No. Okay, keep going.
The user experience in the new Evoke system will be better internally and externally. Internally, for my staff, there are many workflow issues they have in PALS today. Like some things that require 15 clicks to get to the processing of a license will now be cut down to 2 clicks.
Yeah.
In addition to that, the new Evoke system will also accept paper applications for our technology challenged folks. That's something PALS doesn't do today.
Appreciate that. No, when I was going to rudely interrupt you, I was just thinking of the security of the mobile app. I guess, do we have a guarantee that there's a security feature in place for those mobile apps? Because we were just talking about, the previous speaker was just talking about how do we secure and make sure everything in our elections is secure, but also when you're dealing with licensure, I mean, I'm sure you're dealing with PII and all that as well. So
We do have a security in place.
And then I see my light is on. Shameless plug for HB 644, the cosmetology booth rentals. We're trying to actually eliminate systemic inequity. So, yeah, shameless plug for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Waxman.
Thank you, Chairman. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's always good to see you.
Likewise, Representative.
I wanted to first start off by asking you about automatic voter registration. Specifically, when this was under discussion, I had the opportunity to work on that issue a little bit before I was joined the legislature, and there was a lot of conversation about sort of the partisan breakdown that this might produce. And I think it's very striking when you look at the numbers. It's really not a benefit to either party. In fact, most or a huge chunk of people are picking to register as independents and not with either political party. I'm wondering if you could just comment a little bit about how that has played out, if that's surprising to you. And I know we do a lot of attention to PennDOT, but there are other ways for people to access this automatic voter registration as well, and I'm wondering if you see that being an impact.
Yes, and you're right in terms of the breakdown. As I mentioned before, it hasn't advantaged one party or another. Automatic voter registration is essentially updating voters' registration in a more real-time way. So if things trend toward one party or another, it captures it a little bit more in real time. As you know, voter registration really lags behind voter behavior. Like a voter will start voting a certain way for years and then eventually get around to changing their party affiliation. And in a closed primary state, and this speaks a little bit to your question about people registering not in a major party, we are, of course, a closed primary state in Pennsylvania. So when you ask if it's surprising to the extent that those voters are choosing to not participate in either the Democratic or Republican primaries. Obviously, any voter can vote however they want in the general election, but that is a trend not unique to Pennsylvania. It is across the country. We've seen more and more of that. It's only that Pennsylvania is one of those states with a closed primary system that has a significant number of people registering third party.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. We've given voters a way to easily opt in, but I think there's a message being sent to both parties about voters kind of feeling about the system as it stands and choosing to opt out from the party, from the political parties. I think that's a very interesting trend. Okay, so I want to just shift gears with a second question, which is about AI. And this is a much broader question, which is, I am curious how your department, when it comes to elections and campaigns, is seeing this new technology play out. And the example that I'll use was just last week. I was gathering nomination petitions to get on the ballot, and I pressed a Ring doorbell. And normally when you press a Ring doorbell, it goes in, you can communicate with whoever's behind. Well, this was a brand new AI one. And it actually said no to me before I could even get in and talk to the voter. Like, it knew what I was asking for.
Were you holding a clipboard at the time?
Yeah, the clipboard. I was, you can imagine. And it was kind of surprising to be denied by a robot to get a petition. And so I'm just, to me, there's just so many interesting things that come out of that. And I'm just, but curious broadly, generally, what are you seeing out there the way that in the last cycle or two, this technology has showed up?
And AI is, across our programs, it's developing so rapidly, it's really been a moving target. And the advances in its maturity are remarkable. And it is very clear that in the election space, it has matured to the degree that it can do significant harm, right? When it comes to making it appear that a candidate said something they didn't say, or a member said that they didn't say, visually or speaking or whatever else. It has tremendous potential to improve voter education as well. But whether it has reached that level of maturity or not, I don't know, because we can never be wrong, right? It can never tell the voter the wrong day of the election. It can never tell the voter the wrong day that's required for the deadline to register to vote or anything else like that. So it has enormous potential. We're already seeing its potential to do harm, and looking forward to its potential to improve voter education.
And now, just as a follow-up, what kind of challenges budgetarily does this create for your department trying to hit a moving target like that?
Well, for us and our communications team, it's really been a matter of monitoring activity where bad faith actors are exploiting AI to mislead voters, to make sure that we can respond to any of that in real time to the extent that we can, using our social media platform, so that if something does appear and is getting some sort of viral traction, that we can make sure that we share the truth related to it. Those are exceptional cases when that occurs, but we want to make sure that voters aren't deceived when there is something AI created that is untrue.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank the gentleman.
I apologize. I just wanted to add one thing. We also collaborate with other states, other jurisdictions through the, I think it's #TrustedInfo campaign. We, like other states, drive people to, this is the official information. What you're seeing on social media may or may not be true. So we collaborate with other states to make sure that people know where to go to get official information about elections.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank the gentleman.
Thank you,
Representative
Representative.
Alsumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary and team, for being here today. Look forward to hearing all your answers to several questions here today. Mr. Secretary, within the governor's budget, it suggests that the governor is also proposing licensing reforms that would make the process for licensed social workers to obtain their credentials the easiest licensure experience in the nation, while maintaining rigorous standards to ultimately draw the more of these professionals to Pennsylvania. The budget book also states that the estimated number of licensed social workers will need to be increased by 12% by 2030 to support the needs of the public. Can you expand on the social worker initiative and how it will make it the easiest licensure experience in the nation?
The objective is to make that process easier without in any way reducing safeguards to protect the health and safety of Pennsylvanians. Part of this is working with educators to make sure that questions that would otherwise be asked on sort of exams are covered Nothing would prevent someone from getting a certification and taking that extra step to sort of get a license. We know the need is there. We've seen other states do this with great success. So that's why it's worth sort of taking a look at to see if we can reduce unnecessary red tape that really serves no purpose and just creates a barrier for someone to provide those services.
So is the theory to basically get as many folks licensed and then qualify them at a later date? I'm just trying to understand that.
I think it's more a matter of integrating the education and the licensing further down the line to make sure that everything that would be covered in a licensing sort of exam process is covered, so that when they graduate, they're able to practice. Again, nothing would prevent someone from either taking an extra step to get that certification. Nothing would prevent an employer from requiring that extra certification. Do you mind if I ask Deputy Secretary Johnson to
No, please
add
do.
to this?
Thank you, Secretary. Yeah, I just want to assure you that the report that you will be able to look at after, I believe it's later today, will.
Could I ask you to speak into the mic, please?
Sure. So the report that the department has put together is part of a comprehensive examination of the licensing requirements to drive the governor's agenda to ensure that not only are we committing to workforce development, but also committing to public health and safety. So, we were given the charge to examine all of the administrative, regulatory, and legislative circumstances surrounding licensure. And what Acting Commissioner Claggett, under the Secretary's leadership, has done is really looked at all of the administrative improvements that we can make, and you're seeing those successes with respect to the licensing times, processing times coming down, the regulatory aspects of those licensing requirements. Those require board interaction, and then of course the last component of that is the legislative infrastructure around licensing requirements, and that's where reports like this help drive the discussion with the General Assembly. We created that report as a tool for you to use so that we could provide the support that you would need to help make the informed decision. So we hope that in whatever capacity we can be supportive, we can do that as you look to make those changes.
Thank you. Can you, Mr. Secretary, will this new initiative, what kind of costs are associated with this, and how will it affect any increases to the Bureau of Professional Occupations and Affairs?
Well, the review itself that our policy team and working with others has conducted, that is not, it's a lot of work, but it's not a significant expense. It's not like we're bringing on additional people to do it or anything else like that. It's a focus of the department and a focus of our policy team. I don't imagine it creates any additional burden on our boards. But ultimately, as Deputy Secretary Johnson said, this is really all up to the legislature and for the administration. You all decide what those requirements should be. Our boards in the Department of State enforce what you decide.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative.
Gentlemen. Representative Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Schmidt. Thank you for your team. You make Roxborough proud, and I just want to say we're claiming you in Roxborough, Philadelphia. That's our secretary. So 2 questions about election security. First one is about misinformation. There's been a lot of talk about elections being rigged. A lot of this is coming from the president, who's saying that he won elections that he didn't because they were rigged. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. What can we tell our constituents that may be swayed by this misinformation and these lies about our elections being safe, free, and fair?
I should have worn my Roxborough, I didn't go to Roxborough High School, as you know, but I should have worn my Roxborough High School sweatshirt here today to testify in front of my representative. Our job at the Department of State is to be a trusted resource for information and to encourage voters to turn to trusted sources of information when it comes to being educated about elections. It is undeniable that the interest in elections has increased just exponentially in the next couple of years. The question is the reliable information that they are consuming adequate, or are they turning to sources of information that are inaccurate? For us, it is very clear, undeniably, that our elections in Pennsylvania have never been more free, fair, safe, and secure, with a paper ballot record of every vote that's cast that's used in 2 audits after every election to ensure that the voters' intent is accurately recorded and their voice is heard.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The second one is about voter intimidation. We talked a little bit earlier, Representative from Allegheny County talked about briefly about voter intimidation. I'd say if there's one concern that has some of my constituents being kept up at night, it's the thought that there may be federal interference with elections, intimidation, federal agents showing up at polling locations. What can you tell my constituents? What can you tell our constituents to allay their fears, to let them know that we are going to be protected here in Pennsylvania and that we're doing everything we can to ensure there won't be any voter intimidation at the polls?
Pennsylvania, as well as any number of other states, have obviously been in contact with our federal partners, whether it's Department of Justice or the Bureau or Homeland Security and others, to make sure that the federal government is aware of these sort of concerns that people are hearing, and to make sure that voting can be conducted in a way where there is not interference. As you know, elections in the United States, determined by our Constitution, are really run at the state level. And states have a responsibility to administer elections working with their federal partners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Secretary Schmidt and team, Department of State. Secretary Schmidt, I, like the good gentleman from Philadelphia, I did live in Roxborough for a little bit, but I proudly serve Schuylkill and Berks County now. So, but I lived right by Roxborough Memorial Hospital for a brief time. And
that's a polling place, by the way.
Pardon me?
The Roxborough Memorial Hospital is kind enough to allow part of its facility to be used as a polling place for
I
voters
voted
in the
for
area. President
President Reagan, or pardon me, yeah, President Reagan at that polling spot. So that tells you how long ago it was when I lived in Roxborough. Mr. Secretary, and it's, would like to talk to you about county election expenses. And so the executive authorization for county election expenses is projected to be $400,000 for fiscal year 26-27. As compared to $1 million in the current budget year. Now, these funds, as you're aware, reimburse counties for special election costs for member of the General Assembly and the statewide recounts. The Pennsylvania Election Code provides that a special election shall be held at the next ensuing primary, municipal, or general election scheduled at least 60 days after the issuance of the writ of vacancy or such other earlier date, which is at least 60 days following the issuance of the writ, as the presiding officer may deem appropriate. Now, the Speaker of the House has scheduled 4 special elections for Pennsylvania House of Representatives, 2 which just occurred this past February, and 2 on March 17th, just a few months before the primary election, which is May 19th of this year. Now, just last week, an article from VoteBeat Pennsylvania stated that Pennsylvania has held 47 special elections for vacant state legislative and congressional seats since 2017. That's more than any other state. 22 of those elections occurred outside of general or primary election, costing taxpayers $4.4 million. Seth Bluestein, of City Commissioner from the city of the first class, said he understands from the legislator's perspective why those special elections are needed to be held quickly. But he also adds that, and I quote, "From an election administration standpoint, to hold an election less than 2 months before a general, when the election could have been on the same ballot, was very frustrating." Also in the article, there was a reference to Louisiana, which only calls special election if 6 months or more remain in the term. Otherwise, the vacancy is filled in the next general election. If that were the law in Pennsylvania, the 2 special elections in Philadelphia in 2024 would not have taken place, saving taxpayers $1.5 million, as those offices were also on the November ballot. I'll get to my question. Do you think, Secretary Schmidt, that the Speaker of the House should make a stronger attempt to schedule special elections during a special or general election in order to save vital taxpayer dollars, given financial concerns of the Commonwealth?
Firstly, it's great that you've referenced Commissioner Bluestein. He was my chief deputy commissioner for a long time in Philadelphia, and I'm very proud of a lot of the work that he's done there. And he replaced me as Republican city commissioner after I left to join the Pennsylvania Department, or left and later joined the Pennsylvania Department of State. For us, our role and responsibility is to oversee elections and to assist the counties in the administration of elections. It is really up to the legislature and the law to determine when they should take place. We've put in our budget ask $400,000 because in doing a review of past years, that amount seemed appropriate for inclusion in the budget for what reimbursement to the counties for special elections should cost. Some have been more expensive, some have been less expensive, and it also really varies on the cycle. As you know, last cycle was a municipal election cycle, which is one where you have the sort of turnover that you would describe.
Yeah, so if I could just interrupt,
I'm sorry,
my
sir.
yellow light's up, sorry, and I babbled too much about Roxborough. So, but the financial impacts do accrue through the Department of State, and so Pennsylvania is an outlier. I mean, we have more special elections than anybody else. Are there any suggestions to bring us into line with the rest of the country and when it comes to special elections and saving money for our taxpayers?
And I read that article from Carter Walker at Vote Beat. I thought it was very interesting. Its findings track with at least our recent experience when it comes to reimbursements for special elections. But again, our job is to oversee elections and work with our county partners in the administration of them.
My time is up, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Gentleman, Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I received a number of calls and emails about this from constituents, and so an invitation went out to all the secretaries of state from the FBI election executive about a call that was held this past Wednesday on February 25th to discuss preparations for the cycle as well as updates and resources available to be provided to you and your staff. Given President Trump's repeated calls to nationalize elections, this was something that was of great concern to my constituents. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, did you attend that call, or did someone from your staff attend that call? And if so, can you talk about, what was discussed?
Yes, I was on that call, as was Deputy Secretary Marks. We work every election, municipal or federal election, with our federal partners. Pennsylvania, just like any number of other states, is curious to receive information from the federal government about what kind of resources they would provide to the states, whether it's cybersecurity testing, whether it is physical infrastructure security testing, or information sharing when it comes to potential threats or anything else like that. So yes, it was Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Postal Service Inspection Service, and other federal partners that were there to brief us on the resources available to us and their role in this process.
Was it an unusual call, or was it sort of the normal contents of a call like that?
I think our working with federal partners is something that occurs in every election. It was unusual in the sense that I don't know that we normally get an email kind of general blast to all secretaries to attend a briefing like it, but the information that was shared was consistent with our experience, and many secretaries participated and asked questions of our federal partners. Deputy Secretary Marks, is there anything you want to add to that?
I just, you know, it sounds like you're getting calls, and the crux of the question is about, the federal government's role in elections. We didn't hear anything on that call that indicated that there was going to be an effort to take over elections. I think there seemed to be a general understanding that elections are, per the Constitution, run by the states. It was mostly informational, as the Secretary said.
I appreciate that. I think that will help alleviate some fears from my constituents. Is the department taking any steps to ensure that elections in Pennsylvania remain secure and under state control, again, as this rhetoric from the federal government comes to nationalize elections?
Yes, and one thing that I just want to mention too is secretaries on the call asked about, for example, federal law enforcement being present at, specifically ICE being present at polling places, and the federal government expressed that there was no plan or intention to do any of that in answering the questions asked by the secretaries. In advance of every election, we work not only with our state partners, but also with our county partners to do tabletop exercises to make sure that our elections are safe and secure, and that if anything sort of interferes or disrupts the process of election administration, that our county partners are prepared to deal with it, and the Pennsylvania Department of State is prepared to deal with it. We do those every election, regardless of what else is going on. Obviously, we're aware of the environment and how the environment changes, and it helps inform our tabletop exercises in preparation before elections.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Reichert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, it's good to see you this morning.
Likewise, sir.
Just real quick, and I'm fairly new to the legislature, but I see we have $1.3 million budgeted for advertising and constitutional amendments. And it's an absolutely critical part, and it's a very unique part of our political system where the people actually get to engage and say yes or no as to how these things are, whether these amendments are to be approved or not. Could you briefly just sort of walk me through the process on your end, how you advertise, at what point that you advertise these things?
Yes, and the department has in place now for more than 4 years, at least 5 years, maybe 6, a system to make sure that when constitutional amendments do come out of the legislature and are passed, that the department is doing all of its responsibilities to make sure that they're advertised in, it's 2 to 3 newspapers of general circulation and all the rest. We included that in the budget. It is not something possible for us to ever really predict, because it's really up to the legislature whether there will be amendments or not on the ballot, but it would be irresponsible for us to not include that as a budget item. Obviously, if it's funded and they don't occur, it's not like that money is spent or moved in some other way, but it is an obligation of the department. And do you mind if I quickly ask Deputy Secretary Marks to add to that?
Yeah, just a very high level, the process. First passage of a constitutional amendment has to be published in a general election per the Pennsylvania Constitution. That publication occurs in 2 newspapers of general circulation in each county for 3 months prior to the election. So it's August, September, and October. On second passage, it can go on the ballot at any regularly scheduled election, at which point the department again publishes not only the proposed amendment, but also the language or the text of the ballot question, the question that will be presented to voters, as well as a plain language statement that is prepared by the Attorney General. And if the majority of voters vote in favor of that constitutional amendment, then that amendment is made effective.
Good. I wasn't sure at which junctures, because it is to your point, sir. You said it has to be passed in 2 consecutive sessions,
Correct.
And so I wasn't sure if you did it after the first passage and then again at the second. I just looking at the legislation that we've passed, I don't think we passed any in the last session, any constitutional amendments that would require. So I wasn't sure if that was, to your point, Secretary, whether that was a line item that we might not be using this year, but suppose we do pass something later on this year, that there might be a potential that we'd have to advertise as this session concludes. Is that a fair understanding of this?
It is, and again, we have to include it to be responsible, because it is a significant amount of money to do that advertising. Right. So if it would occur, it would have a significant impact on our budget, and that's why it's included as a line item. And I also want to add that everyone in the department who has any responsibility related to any constitutional amendment, any part of the constitutional amendment process, has to take training every year and sign off that they took.
Good, and yeah, 'cause I obviously there was, well before your time, obviously there was an issue, but I just wanted to make sure that, again, if I agree the responsible thing is to ask for that money in case that something in case later this year we do pass something that would require some advertising. I'm not sure if that will be the case, if the House and the Senate being the way they are, but I at least appreciate you thinking forward enough to be able to put that in there. And I just, again, wasn't sure where we stood with all of that. So thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Young.
Good morning, everybody. Secretary Schmidt and
morning,
the rest of the team, and also Deputy Secretary Kalonji Johnson. Please tell your wife I said hello. She was one of my welcoming committees when I first came here to the Commonwealth. She's amazing. My question is about the more folks that are working the polling sites now. We know that the numbers are dwindling. We're having a lot of troubles with making sure that those people who were there for a long time, we depended on them, they are now going away. And so not only at the polling sites, but also at our election directors, election directors spaces as well. So what are we doing to not only support the new individuals, but to reduce the turnover at these polling sites?
And they are, as you know, Representative, on Election Day, the most important people when it comes to election administration. It's certainly not Secretary of State. It's not even a county board of elections. It's really your neighbors who volunteer for more or less a 14-hour day, getting there before the polls open and after the polls close to serve in those roles. They are essentially volunteers. They're paid very little for that service. And we have seen significant turnover, not just at the county election administrator level, but at the polling place level as well. It's why we formed a couple of years ago a training unit in the Pennsylvania Department of State to provide training that had never been provided before, so that we can help train our county partners with all the turnover, with so many new people. Somebody is responsible for, recycling at the county level for 10 years, and then all of a sudden they're responsible for administering elections. And that is not an easy thing to do with incredible scrutiny. So our polling unit, which is led by an experienced county election director, has provided all of these services, provided this training. The participation level is phenomenal, not just from new people, but from people who've been around for a long time administering elections at the county level. And that helps, I think, also bring about a degree of uniformity when it comes to election administration in Pennsylvania, and to make sure that they're not just left out there trying to figure out how to run an election, but we can provide them with the resources and training that they need so that voters can make their voices heard.
So for that specific question, what I heard you say is that it's the type of training that you're now introducing to these people who are interested in coming into this space.
We've been doing it a couple of years now, and the response has been terrific, and the modules that we create are really reflecting the requests from newer election directors coming in at the county level to let us know what sort of training that they need to do a good job and to provide training then to their poll workers at the precinct level. It is an enormous number of people in Pennsylvania that, as you can imagine, are needed on Election Day. Philadelphia, my home county alone, is 1,703 precincts with 5 people volunteering for 14 hours on election days to do it. So it is a very heavy lift, and we need to make sure that the people who serve in that role are valued.
Awesome, thank you for that. And what type of post-election audits do you do, and what type of technology is used to help the public have a full faith in the results in post-elections?
Did you want to add anything to the poll worker question?
I can do it off record. I just wanted to shout out for a local high school. As you know, the General Assembly about 20 years ago, allowed 17-year-olds to serve as poll workers. And there are a lot of local communities, teachers, and in this case, a swim team coach who recruited poll workers, dozens over several years. So, that's something that we try to lift up as well.
To answer your audit question very quickly, I'm sorry. Counties in Pennsylvania, there are 2 different types of audits that occur after every election in Pennsylvania to make sure that tabulation of votes is done accurately and to identify any discrepancy between the tabulation of votes and the certified election results. One is an audit of a certain percentage of ballots. Another is a different sort of audit that is a much more random sampling of election results to identify any discrepancy that would occur. We do essentially a drawing that is also random, so that counties essentially audit random batches of ballots to ensure that their certified election results will match the results from the audit. And if any discrepancy occurs, obviously that would be a concern, and it's there for that purpose, so that people can have confidence in election results.
I appreciate your responses. Thank you. And I will say before leaving, I too had 2 17-year-olds who also participated in election polling. So thank you for that.
Thank them for their service, please.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Flood.
Good morning, Secretary. Thank you for being here. And I just want to say it's been great working with you with some of the election issues that we've had in Northampton County. Election integrity should be and needs to be paramount, not just in Northampton County, but across Pennsylvania. We all want an election system that we can trust in, so people want to vote. And when that happens, and they trust in that system, then I think that, we will have less of the issues that we've been facing. I want to talk about the SURE system. There's been some questioning on that prior. Back in late 2023, the Department of State canceled a planned upgrade to the Pennsylvania's election system, the SURE Vote IT modernization system, the system modernization for managing voter rolls. From what I understand, the new SURE was signed about a year ago. The governor is recommending a $20.6 million for the statewide Uniform Registry of Electors appropriation. It's about the same as the current year. Initially, that goal was to have the new SURE system ready for the 2024 presidential election. We know that that didn't happen. We're 8 months away from the 2026 general election. Can you provide us with an update on where we are with that system, and are you able to confidently predict that the new system will be ready in time for the 2026 general election?
We canceled, to walk through the chronology very quickly, we canceled, had to cancel the contract with the previous vendor, and I believe after doing our review in 2023, I believe we canceled it in December of 2023. There was a mutual thing with us and the vendor. It was clear that that was not going to lead to success, that it was not going to provide the sort of security to the system and fulfill the needs for the county level. So that was not a very easy decision to make, but we were prepared to move then very quickly on working with our county partners and producing an RFP to get a new system requirements sort of advertised for vendors to bid on, and we, like you said, signed that agreement a little less than a year ago. The new shore replacement system would certainly not be in place by general 2026. That is not something that we would have ever envisioned, especially since we only entered in this contract a little bit than a year ago. We would never release a system to make available for such an important purpose that is anything less than as good as it could be, with our county partners, again, informing every step of the way. And it's really a matter of making sure that when you release a system like that, it's done responsibly with your county partners, the end users of the whole system, and to do it and to make sure the timing works out as well as it possibly can. Like, you would not want to roll out a new system, I would think, in a general presidential election. You wouldn't want to roll out a new system in October of a presidential election year. So, but there is great urgency to it, and I assure you, the Department of State and our county partners are as eager as you are and anyone can be to get a new system in place that is that fulfills our needs.
Well, and I appreciate that you being honest about that timeline, because I think that's really important with this new system that I'm sure you're actively involved in making sure we can trust in. Can you guarantee that when this new system is implemented, that it will be secure, it's going to maintain accurate records, internal controls, and transparency in record keeping, which were issues identified in the 2019 performance audit by the Auditor General?
Yes, we would not release a system that sounds like a double negative. We would not release a system that would not fulfill all of those requirements. We will release a system that does fulfill those requirements.
Will there be any oversight of the counties and making sure that the training is effective and they're connected properly? And I'm asking this because we've had issues in our county, and
Right.
so I just want to make sure that there's some sort of state oversight with that.
There is, and we work hand in hand with the counties from the very beginning. That's what's so important about the development of the system, is working hand in hand with the counties from the very beginning, so that we're providing a system that is safe and secure, that you discussed, and also one that our counties are comfortable interfacing with, since they work with it every day. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just say, to your point, accountability is built in this system. It's going to be a lot more intuitive, and we expect that some of the errors we see in the current system will be avoided just simply because the system itself is a lot more intuitive. We'll also have more visibility into what counties are doing, and counties will have more visibility in themselves into what their staff are doing.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate having this dialogue with you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have a quick question, so I shouldn't get the hook on time later. But I do want to engage in a couple of the earlier inputs deliberately. At Mafacton High School in my district, we had so many high schoolers involved in the poll worker scenario, we had to do half-day shifts. And so I recognize Mr. Maida at Mafacton High School for an enormous program that put together on civics for those kids. Mr. Secretary, my mother worked 38 years at Roxborough Memorial High School, Memorial Hospital, 38 years. So,
who would ever imagine that Roxborough would have such a big presence here today?
I wanted to get in on that. Yeah. I think this is a pretty straightforward question, but I think it's important to the dialogue as we go along. In the academic literature, there's a very strong relationship between, and I'm talking about incarcerated individuals and voting rights, a very strong connection between getting their voting rights back if they leave their incarcerated scenario and less recidivism. People who get involved in their community and their voting rights don't end up back in our justice system. And I think there's been momentum in the House, particularly around veterans who have been incarcerated, right, and helping them get their rights and benefits back as they move back into the general population. So I guess my question is anything in your mind that we could be doing legislatively to help remove any additional barriers so that individuals who get involved in the justice system and serve, their time, that they can return back to the general population and be successful, and at least from my perspective, and what the House has voted on, particularly to have our veterans be successful.
And Representative, I know this is an important issue for you and has been for some time. In terms of legislative changes that would be necessary, that's something that we can discuss, whether there would be anything legislatively that would improve that. We work with our county partners to make sure that that when it comes to voter registration, and I've also met with the Secretary of Corrections about this as well, to make sure that obviously only people eligible to register to vote and vote are registered to vote and vote, and the universe of people, whether they're incarcerated misdemeanants or pretrial detainees or any of the other categories of people who are eligible to vote, even while incarcerated, have access to their right to vote. Many of our counties, including the counties where our prison system is located, I know Mercer County and some others do a lot of outreach to work with them to make sure that when people are leaving the custody of the state, that they have access to registering to vote.
Yeah, I do know that, particularly for some of our veterans, the issue is having a home of record, right? Because they may not have that the day that they leave the jail system, right? So we're thinking hard about how to accommodate that so that those rights can be restored.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for your discussion.
Thank you, Representative.
Yep.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Recognizes Representative Krupa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here today. Representative Friel stole some of my questions, so as you well know, there were issues on Election Day in Fayette County. I represent the southern half of Fayette County. I want to, first of all, thank you and your team for meeting with the delegation via Zoom. We went over a lot of those issues. And I don't want to spend all my time on that today, particularly given how well Representative Friel did. But can you confirm that we are still on track, that the issues that happened with those electronic poll books, that the steps that you've taken to put in place that our 2026 elections, that will not be an issue in 2026 or moving forward with respect to the wrong files being transmitted from the state to the counties for our electronic polls?
Right, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with you and the delegation on that issue to help you inform us about steps that we could take. As you know, we've committed to a couple of things. One, and to be clear, the failure that occurred was a failure of the Department of State. The county did a phenomenal job addressing that challenge on Election Day in real time. It was the only time that has ever occurred. At the Department of State, we provide a service to that county that we provide to some other counties where we do some of that work for them to assist them with preparation of poll book extract, and all the rest. But one of those things is adding additional steps internally in the department, as we described when we met the other day, and also to make sure that when we provide those services to counties, that the counties and their vendors check the information that's provided to make sure that it's accurate. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I wanted to note that those changes that we made, we actually implemented sort of a dry run in the most recent special elections.
Great.
So we're ready to go for 2026.
And I commend you on your ownership of the issue, that there was no finger pointing. Particularly our election bureau directors are under a tremendous amount of stress, and from very early on, the Department of State took ownership of that mistake, and I appreciate that. But I do, before moving on to my next line of questioning, it is just the reason why it's so important, as you all well know, is the right to vote is the foundation of this great nation, and when anything makes the voter feel like their vote doesn't count, we want to avoid that at all costs. Moving on slightly to the Pennsylvania election integrity grants, the taxpayer funds distributed to counties to support administration of elections, which effectively eliminated the Zuckerbuck issue and private funding of some of these issues. My understanding is the Commonwealth allocates $45 million for this program. Fayette County received over $400,000. My understanding is that recently DCED was making some requests for some information, apparently through some type of accountability audit. And I fully support every layer of taxpayer funds, including especially grant money, should be accounted for. I think what is causing a little bit of heartburn is that the way the DCED is now requiring that it be reported after the fact is a little bit different than the way some of the election bureaus were originally tracking it and accounting for it. So how closely is DCED working with the Department of State to manage and manage these funds to make sure that, and forgive me, has the Department of State reviewed or approved the reporting and documentation requirements that are now being requested by DCED?
Well, as you know, the Act 88 made it so that DCED is providing that funding stream and not the Pennsylvania Department of State. We are consulted by DCED on different election-related matters about eligibility and other things like that, but we don't administer the program.
No, we do. We conduct office hours with counties every couple of weeks, and we will invite DCD, and we do collaborate with them. My understanding of the specific issue or the pain point for counties is the post-reporting is that the form is different. It's a spreadsheet, and there are a number of fields on there that they're not familiar with, because most election grant funding they get typically comes through the department. Election security grants, and this is a little unfamiliar. But we've certainly committed to working with DCD if we can somehow, streamline that or provide additional instructions. But ultimately, it is, it's a DCD form, a DCD process, and they have to make sure they, do the appropriate level of auditing to make sure the money's being spent.
Thank you. I have so many more questions I want to ask, but my red light is on. Thank you so much for your time.
May I just very quickly add, and having visited, as I've said before, all 67 of our counties, I can't tell you how grateful our county election administrators are to the legislature for providing resources in Act 88 that they can use to acquire additional equipment or help pay for things that their counties otherwise don't have the ability to pay for or are not otherwise paying for, that assists with the administration of elections.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Malagari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, and your entire team for being here with us today.
Thank you, sir.
I represent a district in Montgomery County, in the Lansdale-Hatfield area, straight up 309 corridor. And in Montgomery County, and I think we touched on this slightly, but I want to ask you a pointed question with regard to the electronic polling books. Montgomery County is looking to go that route and utilize electronic polling books for their election rolls. Is there a piece of legislation that is needed for them to be able to do that in that implementation?
There really wouldn't be any legislation that's required for them to do it. Almost half of our counties use electronic poll books at this point. I think that's about right. 33.
Almost precisely.
So they would be just adding on to that already utilized piece of technology.
It is, and it has several advantages, obviously, when it comes to voters checking in, when it comes to updating who voted immediately after the election, as opposed to manually scanning in names one at a time. It allows for that happen very, very quickly. There's a number of advantages to electronic poll books, and that's why some counties have chosen to go that direction.
Appreciate that. And while we're on the line of streamlining the process, we in the legislature and those who are hoping to join the legislature over the past several weeks have been working to gather petition signatures to get back onto the ballot. We heard about that process a little bit earlier. My question to you is this, and it's pretty straightforward. That process, would you agree that that entire process of petitioning is ADA compliant?
Whether the process of gathering signatures for nomination petitions,
correct,
whether that process is ADA requirement compliant. Do you mean the filing of it, or
so
the
actual
gathering
participation within the process of a person wanting to sign that petition? Would you agree that that process that they currently go through now is ADA compliant? And here's the reason why. Maybe I'll help you with this.
Yeah,
so there have been instances of individuals at a door that may have Parkinson's disease, may have a neurological disorder, may have an optical disability of some sort that prevents them from being able to participate in that part of the electoral process. Now, when you go to the actual election day, we have accommodated for people to be able to participate in that process, maybe they're deaf, maybe they're blind, maybe they have a neurological dysfunction or disorder of some sort. Would you agree that we should probably make this part of the process of elections more ADA compliant? That is my question for you.
I'm certainly sensitive to this issue. My dad has Parkinson's and my mom has Alzheimer's. So it is certainly something that the challenges that it presents, I'm well aware of. When it comes to nomination signature petition gathering, it is admittedly not something that I've consulted with our team about. I certainly sincerely will and get back to you about it.
I appreciate that. It's something that has come up. I'm sure all of us have experienced this within our communities. And when you ask someone to sign and they physically cannot, it's another way that kind of disenfranchises them from participating in the process when they have the right to do so. I thank you for your answer on that. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here. And I did want to just mention, I appreciated the gentleman from Montgomery County bringing up the last issue. I actually encountered that with someone in my district the last time we were circulating petitions. He was legally blind and really wanted to sign and was trying to figure it out. So I'm happy to talk to him afterwards, but it is a problem in our communities that we should be addressing. I wanted to turn and go back to discussing the voter registration and education appropriation. I know you had mentioned that in presidential years, sometimes you need more budget for that area. And I was looking at the past levels of funding over that period of time, going back actually all the way to fiscal year 2013 to 2014. And so in 2013, 2014, it made sense that we increased that budget because voter ID had been passed, which is Act 18 of 2012. That was signed into law, but then it was challenged, obviously, from a court perspective. But there was additional money that was allocated that year, essentially expecting that there's something that we need to be spending that money on. And then when you look at the next 12 years, which includes 3 presidential years in there, the funding is pretty flat. I mean, it goes up and down, but I'm happy to give you these numbers afterwards. But I just wanted to share that because I know you had said, like in presidential years, sometimes you may need more money in that area. And so when we're looking at, for this budget, the governor wanting a 250% increase, I'm just wondering what specifically, when we don't have a new election law that we're trying to make sure that voters are aware of, is there something that is a significant change that we might be expecting? Whether that's voter ID or something else that's a drastic change that you would need that additional funding for?
It's not really so much of a change, and you're right about funding on it having been flat over previous years. We have requested additional funding for it in the past. I know that we certainly did in 2024, because in federal election years, voter turnout increases so much, the burden that counties have to bear to educate voters about what I mentioned, the deadlines and all the requirements and all the rest in advance. That is something that we would be in a position to do to help them with the deadline. Also to make sure that new voters are made aware of what the requirements are and all the rest. You get more new voters in a federal election year, and that is, again, something that our county partners, it's a burden that they usually carry that we can help alleviate. But voter education, again, as I committed before and would commit again, no voter education would take place in a way that is in any way specific to any party or geographic location or anything else like that. It would be uniform to everybody all the time.
I appreciate that the spending would be uniform across the Commonwealth, like you just stated, but I guess I'm just really having a problem understanding why there's such a 250% increase when during 12 years with presidentials and midterms and all of it generally is somewhat flat. So I'm just trying to understand like what this money is actually for. If it ends up making it into the budget this year, where would that money actually be spent? Because from what I can see, like there really isn't that much of a difference, not that large of an increase, not a 250% increase.
And again, it is, they are resources that we've requested before and I know did not receive some years ago. Mailings to no voters are a significant portion of that. Messaging to voters to let them know, advertising, whether it's radio or digital, that would be a significant portion of the voter outreach and voter education that we would do. Secretary Marks, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's right. And certainly the cost of that kind of advertising has gone up
So
considerably over the years.
is there like a specific, like is there a list of things, like you just mentioned advertising, is that newspapers, is it online? I know that's an issue that, you know,
I
that
think
we
it's
are
all
dealing
of the
with.
above, as Secretary said. We want to make sure we're covering, you know, every voter in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As Secretary mentioned, new voters, you know, we've also had quite a bit of litigation over the past several years regarding elections, and you know, part of our effort is also making sure people understand what the current rules are that they have to meet. So, you know, it's really just making sure there's no confusion, so that when people show up at the polls or vote by mail, they know exactly what they need to do to ensure that their vote is counted.
And I appreciate that, and I agree with that. I would just say that because it's just such a stark difference, it would be great if you guys could show us a little bit more detail about why you need 250% increase that area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we can certainly provide that, and it's also good to be back here. Last year, when I was sitting right here, you said, are you going to come back next year and say the compacts are not done yet? And I'm happy to be here that since then, the compacts were completed, and we're grateful for the work the legislature did to help move that process along once we had worked out whatever issues the department had encountered in the past with our federal partners.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, the gentlelady. Representative Gazarovski.
Thank you. And thank you for being here today. Chairman, next week, the Scranton gang might be a little insufferable because I know they are claiming Roxborough, but we have, like, next week we got transportation, aging. Colonel Paris left us from Scranton, so we don't have the state police anymore, but next week we have our Scranton folks coming. So you can have the Roxborough, the gentleman today, you got to claim him, but next week maybe a little bit more insufferable with the Scranton crew. Thank you for being here today. Representative Waxman spoke a little bit about AI in the election space. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, and it's out of the AI is kind of like they say the toothpaste is out of the tube and the guardrails and how to kind of, you know, make some regulations with AI. And there are good space for AI, I understand that. But when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to our professional licensed nurses and physicians and physical therapists using AI in their space, I just wanted to know, you know, sometimes AI can actually impersonate. And as a licensed professional nurse myself, I am worried about the patient population and having that AI kind of going too far. And I didn't know what you and the department can do to kind of regulate or put some monitors on AI when it comes to professional licensed.
Well, it can undoubtedly be a resource, but it's not a resource that any individual should expect to provide a responsible level of care. And we know, and I know the governor has spoken to this too, about how AI bots essentially impersonate healthcare providers. We have that responsibility at the Department of State to license healthcare providers, and it's one reason why the governor asked the Pennsylvania Department of State and announced, I believe last week, that we've created a task force related to AI in this space so that when complaints come our way related to AI systems purporting to be healthcare providers, that our prosecution team and our investigation team can and will prioritize those complaints to make sure that any party involved in it is held accountable, that we bring it to our board's attention for enforcement action or anything else that we can do, because it is such a very important issue and a very dangerous one if people are relying on that information for healthcare decisions.
Thank you. I actually didn't know about the task force. That's good to know, because I know AI in healthcare, certainly with rural access dwindling and the need for more professionals and having a hard time retaining and recruiting them in the rural parts of Pennsylvania when it comes to healthcare. I understand AI and bots and such access is something that is an access for patients, but that I did not know about the task force, so that's good to know. Thank you.
And as you can imagine, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to any number of things, the dangers that it presents, despite the fact that it can obviously be a resource, but it's no substitution for individual care.
No, AI cannot replace nurses. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, the nurse.
Who can?
That's right. Representative Anzel.
Thank you, Chairman Harrison, and thank you, Secretary Schmidt, for being here.
Yes, sir.
Secretary Schmidt, back in, I want to say 23, when I was on state government, you gave some testimony when you were the commissioner of Philadelphia City. There were some heart-wrenching stories of some folks who were here legally, and they were registered to vote not knowingly, and it ended up denying them naturalization. Are you satisfied since then that we have resolved the issues of non-citizens registering to vote through the motor voter?
And are you speaking about the state government committee in
23? I want to think it was maybe
17?
24. I could be wrong. You know, the years go.
Yeah, I know. if I was a commissioner then it would have been.
Yeah. But it was in 24 when you were given testimony.
Yes,
about
I
when
did
you were
testify to it, and the issue was that I raised the city commissioner and approached the Pennsylvania Department of State about was when people who are not eligible to register to vote, non-citizens, were sort of captured in that process, that it harmed both, potential to harm both election integrity and them as individuals, because if they were not eligible to register to vote or voted, then it's grounds for, if they seek to become new Americans, grounds for their rejection and possible deportation from the United States.
Didn't it? Wasn't there some that kind of got hung out to dry, so to speak?
I'm aware of several examples of it. I've gone and met with people that has happened to in the past, and spent, as you know, years working on that issue to make sure that not only is election integrity safeguarded and strengthened, but that people wouldn't have that process occur to them.
Yeah. In the past few years, maybe since then, has your department reached out with PennDOT or got together? Do we have any recent safeguards in the automatic voter registration program?
Yeah, after raising this issue and working with the Pennsylvania Department of State, working with PennDOT, changed the motor voter system so that when a non-citizen would go to a PennDOT office, they would no longer encounter any of the voter registration kind of interface and would not be inadvertently sort of captured in that whole process. So if you are not a citizen and you are eligible for a driver's license in Pennsylvania and you go to a PennDOT office, a non-citizen will not encounter the voter registration system.
Okay, and the reason I bring this up is, we know of the two folks who got the CDLs issued through Pennsylvania. But there are folks that are non-citizens that can obtain a driver's license, correct? What safeguards do we have? So if there is a non-citizen here who can obtain a license, whereas opposed to somebody who is here illegally that are not allowed for a license or to register to vote?
So when a non-citizen is eligible for a driver's license in Pennsylvania and they go to a PennDOT office, they're showing their stay papers, their foreign passport, all the documentation that would make them eligible to receive a driver's license. As I said, they don't encounter any of the voter registration system, but as part of that process, PennDOT bounces that applicant off of the Department of Homeland Security to ensure that they are here eligibly and eligible to receive a driver's license as part of that process. Is there anything you want to add?
No, and from their record is tagged, that they're here, that they have legal presence, and because of that tag, they're kept completely away from the voter registration screens, so they're not given an opportunity to register to vote. You asked about recent changes. Just in the past few years, we did expand, working with PennDOT, we did expand the number of languages that the motor voter screens are translated into from 14 to 31, so that if somebody inadvertently sees those screens, they can see in their own language what the requirements are, including the requirement that they be citizens.
Yeah, and I think just one last question. So whenever we get our information from Homeland Security, do we do anything additional just to verify that one more step that, this information is legit? Do we just take Homeland Security's word for it, or do we go and try to do our own little homework on it?
PennDOT, Department of State really isn't part of that process. PennDOT essentially pings off the Department of Homeland Security to check an applicant to see if they are in the United States legally, and if that is approved and it's an almost instantaneous process, then they would be eligible to receive a driver's license. The examples that you used about the CDL people, they did not register to vote. They would not have encountered voter registration screens or anything else like that.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two lines of questioning here. One is on mail-in voting, and the other is independence voting in the primary. Regarding mail-in voting, I first became concerned about this issue of making sure everyone has a full opportunity to have their vote cast and counted, and the concerns about these small errors that could happen that could lead to a vote not being counted. During the 2020 presidential litigation, I was one of the attorneys on that, and I saw the arguments that were raised at that time by President Trump that frankly would have sanctioned some disenfranchisement in the mid-state while undermining efforts that were made elsewhere to make sure these mail-in votes are being counted. So, I'm wondering, we have people making small errors. What's being done? What improvements have been made to make sure that folks can be sure that their votes are being counted when they make mail-in ballots, and that they're not, I have due process concerns with small errors, making sure that we tell these people that there's been a small error, give people an avenue to make sure that they can vote provisionally or that their vote's counted, and certainly want to make sure that we're making those possibilities for error less likely to occur. So I'm wondering what the department's doing.
One authority that the Pennsylvania Department of State has is to require what appears on a mail ballot envelope that the voter is completing before returning it to their county board of elections. We worked with stakeholders on this. We worked with experts in this area. We worked very closely with our county partners and redesigned the mail ballot envelope to bring attention to what is required from voters to complete before returning it. We rolled that out and have now had a couple of elections behind us that have shown it having a significant decrease in rejection rates for voters, making sure that it's very clear that they need to sign it, and all the rest, and making the process much more user-friendly. That was so successful that we just completed the same thing for provisional ballot envelopes to make sure that they're designed in a way that voters can easily understand what's required of them, so that votes are not rejected as a result of a fatal defect that a voter might complete when returning the envelope.
And has there been any developments in terms of making sure that people know if there's been an error in their ballot? That was always a concern for me, due process-wise, if the government's going to take anything away for folks, that we give them notice and opportunity to cure. Is there developments on that in terms of letting people know?
I mean, we encourage counties, that is a county level thing, not a Pennsylvania Department of State thing. So we encourage counties to make sure that they share with voters when ballots come in. They obviously have to timestamp them and they have to record them in the SURE system as having arrived. And if they become aware of an apparent fatal defect, like it's not signed, to one way or another reach out to voters to make them aware of that fatal defect.
And regarding independents voting in the primary, 1.4 million of our fellow Pennsylvanians are registered as an independent. A lot of times it's our veterans. There's currently several bills to have independents permitted to vote in the primary. I'm wondering, is Department of State preparing for that? Are they anticipating any issues that could come up with independents voting in the primaries? And I'm just wondering the level of preparation and any administrability concerns that the department might have that we should look for in terms of legislation as well.
It's really a prerogative of the administration and the General Assembly to determine whether to allow independents to participate in our primary system. There are some states that do it the way that Pennsylvania does, many that do not, and they have open primaries and other sorts of approaches to voting in primary elections. Obviously, if there were changes to legislation allowing non-major party voters to vote in primary elections, then we would work closely with our county partners and do the sort of voter education that would be needed to make sure that those voters are aware that they can participate.
And the department is prepared to be able to handle those types of issues should they come up or should a bill pass?
Well, it would be a significant change, and we would certainly work with our county partners to make sure that voters would be aware should that a change occur.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentleman. That's it. Oh, Chairman Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, and the rest of you folks for being here today.
Thank you, Chairman.
When I was driving over here today to the Capitol, there was a story on the radio station I was listening to, the news, about a person who voted in Pennsylvania by mail, and the same person had voted in person in Florida in the same election. So that person voted twice. Now, our system is based on one person, one vote, and if the same person votes twice, they're stealing democracy. So it's really hard for the federal government to keep track to make sure the same person's not registered to vote in more than one state, like the person was in the news story I listened to. The Department of Justice, they have sued different states, including Pennsylvania. They want information. They just want to make sure that the same person isn't registered to vote in two different states. They want to make sure that non-citizens are not registered. But you folks are resisting giving the information they need. I'm just curious why you don't just give them the information, because I think we should all have the same goal. We want to make sure only citizens are registered, and we want to make sure that the same person is not registered in more than one state.
Yes, Chairman, and you'll be glad to know that it was the Pennsylvania Department of State that identified that voter and referred them to law enforcement and worked with law enforcement every step of the way to make sure that they were held accountable for having committed voter fraud. As rare as that occurs, we are nevertheless something that we always scrutinize for and investigate whenever it does occur. The DOJ requests that you reference, it is the position of the department that not only would we not provide the Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, and all sorts of other personally identifiable information to the Department of Justice like this, that we are not even legally allowed to. State law, federal law, and the Constitution of the Commonwealth would prevent us from sharing that. That is why we decline to provide that information to the Department of Justice, as have many other states across the United States. Red and blue alike, Kentucky, Utah, Idaho. It's really not been a red or blue or Republican Democratic issue. It's been an issue of states having the responsibility to safeguard their voters' private information. And in their cases, in our case, we would not, it is our position, we could not even legally provide that information even if we had wanted to.
With all due respect, Mr. Secretary, the federal government already has everybody's Social Security numbers. They're the ones that give them out. They just want to be able to match them up. I was curious about common names earlier today, so I did a search. They estimate there's over 40,000 people in the United States with the name James Smith. So if you're trying to figure out if a person named James Smith is registered in more than one state, there's no way to do it unless you have their Social Security number. And it just seems like, I'm curious, like which article and which section of the PA Constitution prohibits the Department of State from giving information like Social Security numbers to the federal government? Or what specific state law says that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania cannot give voting information to the federal government?
Well, Chairman, I would be happy to provide our letter to the Department of Justice in response to their request. And this matter is being adjudicated, obviously, across the country in federal courts. I think 3 states so far have had federal court decisions. All of them upheld the state's denial of providing that information to the federal government, that they were either prohibited from doing it or the federal government had no authority to demand it.
Well, I just think it's unfortunate. How much money are we spending? Like, how many hours of attorney time? How much money is this costing to fight against giving information that could just be given to make sure the same person, doesn't vote twice, or to make sure that non-citizens are not voting? How much is being spent on this?
In terms of the litigation that we well, the litigation has come from the federal government to us, not the other way around. And safeguarding the personal information of 8.8, 8.9 Pennsylvanians is not something that we would, it is something that we take very seriously, and not something that we would do unless required to do so, and had confidence that that information would not in any way be compromised or shared.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Bellman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. I wanted to expand a little bit upon some previous questions and just ask you what can be done to draw youth into the election process? What else can we do to draw youth into the election process?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is obviously as a result of automatic voter registration in Pennsylvania. I mean, voters still have the ability to opt out if they choose not to register to vote. So no one's being forced to do anything if they don't choose to do so. But automatic voter registration, previous studies have shown, has been helpful in making sure that more younger people, when they get their driver's license, provided that they're eligible because of age, are able to register to vote. Voter outreach, stakeholder groups, nonprofits, any number of other organizations really do the most outreach when it comes to those sorts of things. It's not something that the Department of State does in any kind of like targeted way, because it's not targeting one voter over any other. But obviously, we want young people to register to vote and to begin a lifetime of voting, so that some secretary down the road can go to Voter Hall of Fame in a county and acknowledge someone for voting for 50 years in a row, and that's because they registered to vote when they were first eligible.
Yeah, I thank you for that. And I remember when you were commissioner, you would always send out a graphic about who voted and which demographics and voted and how much they voted. So I know you know the data well, and that was leading into another one of my questions, which was just in how can we overall increase voter turnout in Pennsylvania? There's still a lot of people that just choose not to participate. But if you'd like to add anything else to that.
Yes, Representative, I was just speaking in terms of my current capacity at the Commonwealth. When I was a commissioner, every person, when they voted for the first time, every younger voter, I sent them a letter, signed the letter, provided all sorts of other information to really acknowledge the important achievement of registering to vote and voting. I would work with our schools in Philadelphia to essentially teach social studies all day to seniors, to talk about the importance of voting and making voter registration materials available to them. Work closely with the public, private, and parochial school system when I was a city commissioner to do that sort of personal outreach that a county official can do that we can't do at Pennsylvania Department of State. Obviously, we want every voter, regardless of age, whether they are seniors in high school or senior citizens, who are eligible to vote, to cast their vote and make their voice heard.
All right. And my last question is, as we approach the 250th anniversary of America with Pennsylvania and Philadelphia being at the center, I'm just curious, as your role as Secretary of State, personally, what does America 250 mean to you? And then also, how can we use this moment to really strengthen democracy for the future?
The organization really leading it has events throughout the Commonwealth. I've been fortunate to be invited to several of them and participate in them. I think one involved reading to students all day. I think it was, I forgot what the book was called. It was like D for Democracy or something like that. It was sort of reading to students about the importance of voting and the importance of this milestone for our republic.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Chairman Struzzi.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Just help me understand the person that voted in 2 different states. How was that person identified? How did you find out about that?
Pennsylvania is part of a system called ERIC, which is a consortium of states that voluntarily enter into that network so that we can work together to identify cases where a voter has voted or registered to vote or voted in more than one state or even within your own state. The ERIC system is something that our state and dozens of others depend upon to help identify voters when you move from one state to another, to update voter records, to make sure that counties are aware of that the voter has moved, so they can conduct the list maintenance that they're required to do to keep our voter rolls as accurate as they can be.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious about that. And then if you could just follow up with the request that Representative Marcel had on the additional funding request for voter education, what that would be specifically used for and how it would be distributed to the counties.
Absolutely, Chairman. We'd be happy to provide that to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Secretary, real quick, a few questions that we can wrap this up. Appreciate you and the department being here. Years ago, I spoke about, you were a city commissioner in Philadelphia. When you were a member of the city commissioners, what was your voter registration at that time?
My party affiliation?
Yes.
Republican.
So you were a Republican member of the city commissioners. For those that don't know, Philadelphia, the majority party is 3 commissioners, correct? 2 from the majority, well, there's 3 commissioners. 1 seat is always reserved for the minority party, correct?
Correct.
And you had the minority seat as a, at that time, registered Republican, correct?
That's correct. I was elected in 2011 and then reelected in 2015 and then reelected in 2019.
As a Republican?
Correct.
Okay.
I've been a registered Republican since 1994.
I was 10, but okay. I'm sorry, you put it out there. I'm sorry.
I'm not.
So Secretary, let me ask you a question. Do you believe elections in Pennsylvania are safe?
Elections in Pennsylvania have never been more free, fair, safe, and secure. They are absolutely safe, as proved by 2 audits after every election and a voter verifiable paper ballot record that is now required in Pennsylvania.
Can undocumented persons vote here in Pennsylvania?
Undocumented, can an undocumented person vote in Pennsylvania? They would not be eligible to register to vote. They would certainly not in any way encounter automatic voter registration or anything else like that. They would have to provide all sorts of information in a voter registration application or process to verify identity before being registered.
Do you so that's a no?
Correct.
Okay. Do you believe that there is widespread voter fraud here in Pennsylvania?
There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud in Pennsylvania, period.
So, in your opinion, as a registered Republican and the Secretary of State of this Commonwealth, charged with elections, you believe that there's not widespread fraud in Pennsylvania, correct?
Regardless of my party affiliation, facts are facts, and there is no evidence to suggest at all that that is an issue that occurs in any widespread way at all. And when it does occur, as the example that I just cited, when it does occur, it is identifiable, and working with law enforcement partners, make sure that people are held accountable for when it does occur.
So you believe that Pennsylvanians should be able to have the faith that their elections and the outcomes of their elections are free from interference and safe in this Commonwealth?
I only ever pause because you're saying, do you believe? And it's really not a question of belief, it's a question of knowing. I know that to be true.
Oh, excuse me. So, okay. I'm sorry. So it's not a belief. You know. So let's do it that way. Mr. Secretary, you know that elections here in Pennsylvania are safe and are free and are not rigged in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You know these things to be true.
I know those things to be true because there's no evidence to the contrary.
So it would be for someone to believe that elections are rigged and that they are not free and fair in the Commonwealth would almost be as ridiculous as not putting your hot sauce in the refrigerator.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything in my briefing materials to address the hot sauce issue that you're citing. I'm unfamiliar with it, and we would be happy to get back to the chairman about that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you to everyone from the Department of State for being here, and a little brevity, my friends. That will conclude our budget hearing with the Department of State. We'll be back here at 1 o'clock this afternoon, where we will be with the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission. With that, this committee hearing is adjourned.